Yes, I know, but I can see here, for example, Michael, you have 200 megabytes.
You need to turn off your camera.
Yeah, only have 17.
And mic.
You got 17 downloaded uploads, so that's a big difference.
Ahora. Hello. Gonna recap here. Hello, I would like to welcome all to the R&I Days, the very first to happen fully online. Thank you for inviting me to moderate a session dedicated to such a relevant topic, which is very close to my interest. Before and after entering the European Parliament, I'm very glad to hear the views of the Commission, the experts, and the participants present today. We know that although the participation of women in higher degree courses has increased exponentially in recent years, and while there are more women with university degrees than men in the European Union, still less than 30% of scientific researchers in the world are women, and they are still underrepresented in science and especially in technology-related fields. It is also true that the statistics at national level are still far from being perfect. We need better cross-nationally comparable statistics on women and men in research and science to understand better the reality in order to change it from remuneration, status, professional alternatives, equality policy, a specific policy at universities and a science minister. And because tackling some of the biggest challenges we face, from decarbonization, digitalization, to improving health, will depend on counting with all talents, which involves getting more women in those fields. Furthermore, these competences we know are essential for the fastest growing and highest paid job categories. Several recent studies show that changes in global labor market. I'm now listening myself back. No, it's okay now. Several recent studies, as I was saying, show that changes in the global labor market will lead to net job creation of 58 million jobs, especially for scientists and data analysts and specialists in artificial intelligence. We know that only 22% of artificial intelligence professionals now are women, so showing a huge gender gap that reflects major issues such as job segregation, biases, and the perpetuation of inequality and stereotypes. So in order to truly combat gender segregation and stereotyping, we need to include, this is a personal opinion, and then I will stop talking, a third transition to the twins transition we are talking all the time, the green and digital one, which is we need to move towards a new organization of care, as care duties still rely heavily on women. The full inclusion of women will not be a reality unless we also tackle the care mandate. Otherwise, we will see the same situation happening as in previous crises, where male work recovers faster, and we will end up with backlashes on gender equality. What has happened now during the COVID-19 crisis and the lockdown, with female researchers sending less and less papers to scientific journals while men were increasing, is quite significant of those differences, and how important it is to tackle also this care mandate and to move beyond a more equal share of this one. So this debate is paramount to find the ways we include women and girls in research, science, and technology communities. Since I always like to say talents are equally distributed, but opportunities are not. And we cannot, as a society, renounce anyone's participation or sacrifice any talent, since each one of them is essential to face the climate emergency and invest to get a green, just, human future. So I'm really looking forward to hear from our experts, our responsible in the Commission, and all the participants. So I will introduce the organization of the session. We'll have 4 parts. In the first part, Jean-Enrique Paquet will present novelties regarding gender equality on Horizon Europe. Then we will move a second part with our other 2 guests, Marcela Linkova and Ges Rice, will join Jean-Enrique Paquet on discussing, putting the focus on the importance of gender equality plans. And at the end, we will ask the public to respond on a poll to a couple of questions. Then we will move specifically to a third part, where we will deal with questions regarding the impact of the COVID-19 on research. And finally, we will open the floor to public, starting with a poll, and then open questions, and then we could all have debate. So I move to, now they're asking me for the poll, so I will not do it now. And I will start with the first part to introduce Jean-Enrique Paquet, who has been working as Director General for Research and Innovation, DG RTD, since April 2018. Bonsoir, Jean-Enrique. He started working with the European Commission in 1993. From 2002 until 2004, he was the Deputy Head of Cabinet of former Commissioner for Research, Philip Baskin. He then worked as a head of unit within the DG Mobility and Transport before becoming the Director. And in 2013, he joined the DG for Neighborhood and Enlargement Negotiations. Before starting his current position, Mr. Paquet served as Deputy Secretary General of the Juncker Commission. So welcome, Jean-Enrique, and very different from last year. But well, also for me, my leg is okay. But the floor is yours. I'm really looking forward to listening the novelties you will tell us. Thank you.
For setting the scene and accepting to moderate our panel this afternoon. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to say indeed a few words on one major novelty which we intend to introduce into Horizon Europe to further promote more gender equality across research organizations. But before I do that, I would like to concur with you that whilst there is no doubt that really good progress was made in the last decade, we are just not there yet. And for the Commissioner for Research, Maria Gabriel, I mean, for the President of the Commission, I think for you in the panel today, there is just much more attention needed to ensure that beyond the younger scientists where balance is within reach, but the COVID-19 crisis showed that nothing can be taken for granted. When you move up research organizations and research careers, it's just not there yet, and I think we need much more. What of course is also equally striking is that in research itself, in research topics, in the way we carry out research, and here again COVID-19 is an interesting wake-up call, the gender biases which we have continue to persist in many cases. I mean, we have improved really quite a bit, but when you look at the literature, when you look at research projects, I hope not when you look at our programs, but maybe also occasionally when you look at our programs, the biases are not yet completely gone away, and there is a real effort to be continued on gender mainstreaming in science and research and innovation. And a last illustration, and probably the one where we are least advanced, is indeed on innovation, precisely on innovation. And when you look at the data on women in startups, women in scale-ups, the capacity of women to raise funding, there is still a major gap which we try to address where we can under the European Innovation Council already now. Now, what I want to focus on very briefly is the work which was done again with many, I'm sure, of the participants. I think Kurt was involved, Marcella is very closely involved. In the work we are doing with research organizations, universities and public organizations to help them put in place policies to address that gap. So gender equality policies, if you want, at institutional level. It's one angle, but it's quite a powerful lever to really change the way organizations deal with the gap, intended or not, but they need to deal with it. And we have therefore promoted in the last program gender equality plans, which are being funded also in terms of training and resources needed to implement them deeply and impactfully. We have had several tens of these gender equality plans picked up by research organizations across Europe. So the track record is really good, and we see that where they were put in place, the situation is visibly improving, and sometimes, in some cases, elements are being really corrected. Now, drawing these lessons and taking into account the need to regenerate and give momentum to the balanced gender equality dimension, and gender is of course one dimension which is a bit broader. It's not just gender which is being tackled in this equality plan, is that we will now ask all beneficiaries under Horizon Europe to have put in place a gender equality plan. So that is not just anymore an offer, it will be a requirement. So to be very clear, we will make the existence of a gender equality plan. We will not judge the impact of it at this stage. Maybe this would be for the next framework program, but we will make the existence of a reasonable, fully owned gender equality plan a requirement to become eligible under Horizon Europe. So in other words, every public organization interested to team up in a consortia to bid for funding under Horizon Europe will need to put in place such a gender equality plan. Maybe we need a little bit of space to put that in place. Let's see. I'll be interested to hear the reactions. This is part of the work now happening in the implementation modalities. As some of you are aware of it already, but we are now ready to go. So I'm really happy to have the opportunity at the Research and Innovation Days to fully confirm the approach, which is, of course, supported fully by Maria Gabriel, our Commissioner. Voilà, that's what I wanted to say. Thanks, Lina.
Voilà. Well, thank you, Jean-Eric. I'm really glad that gender equality plans will be a eligibility criterion for Horizon Europe and a starting point really to set up the implementation of sustainable and innovative GP. So we open the discussion now with our guests, with Marcela Linkova and Karl Rice. So let me first introduce Marcela Linkova. She's the head of the Center for Gender and Science at the Institute of Sociology of the Czech Academy of Sciences and chair of the Standing Working Group on Gender in Research and Innovation. She has worked on gender equality in research and at a national and European level for many years, and is currently coordinating the EU-funded project Gender Action. Marcela, what do you think? I mean, just a question to introduce. What do you think should be the role of member states and the responsibility to bear with national strategies on gender equality? I mean, especially now that you are your position as chair of ERAC. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and really thank you for having me here today to contribute to this really important discussion. Very clearly, the member states have a huge role to play. If we take my country, the Czech Republic, the Ministry of Education supports the Center for Gender and Science, and the financial support has allowed me to take on the responsibility of chairing the Standing Working Group on Gender in Research and Innovation. One of my colleagues is working with national authorities and research funders on policy design and measures for gender equality, and others are working with research performing organizations. And for this, we have a community of practice called Community of Change, which brings together at this point more than 150 representatives from universities and research institutions. And we provide training, networking, and experience sharing to implement the HR Award and gender equality plans. And we are, of course, happy to share our experience, as we did recently, for example, through the EU-funded project Act on Gender and its community of practice called the JNC, run by our Polish colleagues. But clearly, the Czech Republic is not alone in this, and we have seen recent legal developments in France, a very ambitious new policy in Ireland, the Netherlands, Austria, Spain, Malta, new developments in Slovenia, and we're hoping also this year in the Czech Republic. The member states are currently preparing Council conclusions on the future of the European research area. And I sincerely hope that they will reaffirm the importance of advancing gender equality in the era. Because if they don't, women and men researchers who care about research and innovation functioning in a fair and equitable manner would have all the reason to be deeply disappointed because the job is not done. Despite some progress we are seeing, there are still issues that we need to tackle: pay inequality, sexual harassment and other forms of gender-based violence, gender biases against women in decision-making positions, and overall those with caring responsibilities. And it must be said, and has been mentioned already, that the current COVID-19 pandemic is threatening to erase the gains made. In the Standing Working Group, we have recently called on policymakers, funders, RPOs, and publishers of scientific journals to make sure that the negative impact is not structurally reproduced through systems of evaluation in the future. And another issue that we must pressingly tackle is intersectionality, diversity, and racism. Science prides itself on contributing to progress and awarding excellence, on providing opportunities to thrive for the best and the brightest. And this is what meritocracy stands for, right? But if we cannot ensure this, and we often still can't, meritocracy remains an empty philosophical concept. Research and innovation need to do better, and member states, in tandem with the Commission, must set framework conditions for the future of era where all researchers can thrive and all fields of research can thrive, including gender studies and gender research, without political bans and restrictions on academic freedom, as has already happened in Hungary and is now threatening to happen in Romania. Gender equality plans are one very important instrument through which gender equality can be pursued. And member states should do just that. They should commit to fund gender equality plans at national level, as they already agreed in 2015. For this, they can also make use of structural funds and create synergy with Horizon Europe. And of course, it would be fantastic if the Commission continued to support umbrella actions to help build European-wide capacity across countries and to support the inclusiveness for the countries where JEBs have less of a history. So from my perspective, this is really an exciting time, and we have an opportunity to set the framework conditions that will allow us to really move ahead, because the change for me has been quite too slow. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Marcela. I completely agree with absolutely everything. There was in Spain for the first time this year, was the first time gender and women's study were evaluated as a research area. For the first time, it has been very important, that people to specialize also in the recognition of these studies. So that was the regarding more or less specialist and member state. Now I would like to move to Carl Rice. He is the rector of Oslo Metropolitan University, and he also leads Norway's Committee on Gender Balance and Diversity in research. He has been engaged in this work for many years, and among other things, has been part of several projects in the EC various framework programs. So if I was, thank you for being here. I was asking Marcel about the role of member state. Obviously, the one for you will be the role of universities. And as I know, is I was vice rector for 5 years, not rector, but vice rector for 5 years. I know quite well what is also this policy at the university level, how important it is also in order to implement whatever legislation or whatever guidelines are in hand. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And thank you for having me. And I hope that you're hearing me okay. I had a couple technical problems at the beginning, but those got worked out. Thank you very much to the technical support people. I would like to make a few comments from the Norwegian perspective, both regarding the role that a gender equality plan can play for an individual university, but also a little bit from the perspective of this committee that I lead, which is actually a committee appointed by the Ministry for Higher Education and Research. And our mandate is to stimulate work on gender equality and diversity in universities and research institutes. And the context in which this happens in Norway is that there's a law that requires gender action plans, or rather gender and diversity action plans. And originally this is part of the anti-discrimination policies that we have in Norway. And it's part of a particular Norwegian vision of what it means to have social justice in the workplace. Well, one of the things that we try to do on the Committee for Gender Balance and Diversity in Research is that we try to support institutions in making their gender equality plans. So even though it's a requirement in the law that every university and college should have one, and not all of them get that far. So one of the things that we try to do that I think will be helpful in the context of the Commission also is that we publish the individual plans from many institutions on the website to make them available for others to look at. And we actually run workshops to help institutions formulate and produce good gender equality plans. Our experience is that people are extremely interested in this. They get lots of good ideas when they come to a workshop. That kind of interaction helps them. So I think it's excellent that we take the step of requiring gender action plans as an entry ticket to funding, but we could also take upon ourselves the role of supporting institutions as they try to develop those plans. Well, at my own institution at Oslo Met, we think about diversity as one of our primary institutional values. And so developing our diversity plan and gender balance plan is one of the ways that we work internally in the university to spread that institutional value. We do see it as part of our contribution to working with sustainable development goals, and as I'm sure many of the participants here would agree, the work of gender equality and diversity and supporting diversity is really important for all of the sustainable development goals, and we have a high awareness of that at the institutional level, that we connect our work on diversity to the SDGs. We're, to the extent that Norway has a city, Oslo is the one that it has, and we have a diverse faculty and a diverse student body, and part of our motivation for working with a diversity plan is to be able to release the creative and innovative potential of the diverse populations that we have. So we think we achieve many benefits for the institution through this work. Most importantly, it gives us a structured and systematic approach to the work that we want to do with gender balance and diversity. We take our plan to our university board for ratification, and when we do that, that commits leadership at all levels of the organization to engage with the plan and to work towards achieving its goals. Another thing that's important in our own work with our gender and diversity plans is that it creates a context for self-assessment. It lets us know, or it forces us to look and see where we're at. So in our case, we do have 50%, a little over 50% women in our full professor positions. That's ultimately due to very hard work being done by very many individual women. And we want every generation, we want to keep that up. And in order to do that, we continue having many activities supporting them in those efforts, and that comes about as part of our plan. The self-assessment that we do then gives us the opportunity to articulate our own goals and identify the tools that we want to use to take them there, and it also makes it easy for us to say where responsibility lies for implementing the various measures that we take. And the last point I wanted to mention is that in our institutional work with our gender equality plan and diversity plan, we have for the last 3 years now, we've been including issues related to sexual harassment in that plan, and because of that, we took the first. Well, I'm proud to say, as the first university in Norway, we included a number of investigative questions about sexual harassment in our internal surveys on workplace environment, and that has led to an important cultural change, whereby 5 years ago, I used to think it was good that there were no reported cases of sexual harassment at our university, but now I understand that actually that's terrible, because the idea that it doesn't happen is silly and naive. And what's been important about doing these surveys in this context is that it's helped all of us in leadership, also me, understand that actually what we need to be working on is creating the context in which those incidents can be reported and properly dealt with. So the list of benefits for developing the leadership team, for developing the culture, the work culture, and for creating not only social justice, but unleashing the creative potential of the entire staff and student body really centers around our work to formulate a gender action plan and then to create the steps necessary to implement it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we go back to Jean-Henri Paquet. Obviously, the question will be regarding the commission we are, well, you are working very much on gender mainstreaming, but it's not yet a reality. Gender budgeting is not yet a reality, and we still are a lot of data missing. I was saying before. So what can the Commission do more than what they are doing in order to really achieve, to improve that gender equality in science and research?
Yeah, maybe Lina, maybe I say a few words, because there were quite a number of comments and questions on how we could move forward with these gender equality plans. And what Kurt was describing for his own institution, I think, resonates quite directly into the way these gender equality plans were promoted in the last cycle on a voluntary basis as an accompanying measure, and picked up in many parts of the Union. So, I mean, of course, the gender equality plan must have a reality that I think goes a bit without saying, but let me say it nevertheless. It needs to be a public document. You need resources attached to it, including human resources at institutional level, but also then the financial resources for implementation. You need some good monitoring. I think that was also mentioned by Kurt, and good data collection. And your example on surveys on sexual harassment show how challenging that can be. So here, certainly we would want to continue to learn collectively on how best to do it. And then training and capacity building across the institution, because one thing is to have it at the institutional level, but an institution in research is in most cases composed of many different sub-entities. So there's a lot of work to be done then across it. A number of areas are considered today, and we believe that this remains valid. And I would be certainly interested to hear Marcela and Kurt and Lina, yourself, and participants to tell us whether that kind of makes sense. The areas are known. It's work-life balance and organizational culture, gender balance in leadership and decision-making, gender equality in recruitment and career progression. So all very necessary and obvious stuff, but not so easy to do, but would be part of the plan. And then the gender dimension to be integrated into the research and teaching content. So that's the mainstreaming part, which is very important. And then there would, of course, also need to be, as you put in place in your university in Oslo, a number of very active and robust measures to deal with gender-based violence, including, of course, sexual harassment. So this is quite broad. For me, this is the minimum. Less doesn't work. And so that also really means that adding this as a criterion in Horizon Europe is not a small feat, and we're well aware of that, because many institutions have been working on gender policies, but not that many in the end, when you look across the landscape, have fully fledged gender equality plans now in place. So there will be, I think, quite a bit of work to be done, which is also why, and I think we had the question too, Lina, is this cannot happen tomorrow morning. But this should not happen at the end of Horizon Europe either, if we want this to have an impact. So the view in my teams now, and I shared that with the Commissioner, and we will confirm it as soon as we have had some feedback, as we are starting to have today, with a new approach. But the view in the team is that we do need certainly a small transition period. As far as I'm concerned, I would say 1 year. So in 21, the calls are all good. You won't have them yet. But as of 22, we would insist that they are at least agreed. Again, they cannot be delivered. And I think it would be counterproductive to ask for them to be delivered, because they would then be meaningless. So they need to be in place, serious, robust, with ownership and the mechanisms being put in place, and that would then carry eligibility. So clearly a lot of groundwork to be done in many parts of Europe between now, we are September 2020, and then calls in the first part of 22. So there is a bit of time. There will be resources under Horizon Europe also, not necessarily limitless resources, but there will be also some resources to support that. I very much hope that, again, building on the really super strong track record of that gender equality plan measure, which is several years old now, that we can really now have that step been taken across Europe. And I didn't see, of course, not in this panel, it would have been a bit counterintuitive, but I didn't see any pushback. And I haven't seen really anyone telling us this is not good. No, nobody would, I suppose, but that it's not possible, nobody did either. And that's the first useful signal.
Great. Thank you very much, Jean-Eric. So just remember that you have a question, a poll question. Does your employing organization have a gender equality plan? And we encourage you to do it, to submit your answer. It will be good. I mean, this is obviously the first step to have a gender quality plan, but another one is to have that gender quality plan is really monitored and with good indicators, because otherwise we could be just like whitening this gender equality and not really working for real advances. I know that quite well as well. We have had equality plans for quite a long, but sometimes if the monitoring is not really good, or at least the indicators could be like increasing the number of women in the university overall, obviously, that is not a good indicator. We really need to tackle where the problems are. So we move to the second, well, the third part of the third, which is the impact of COVID-19 on research and researchers. And I would like to now give the word to Jean-Eric Paquet first, because I know you have to leave a bit earlier. So if you don't, Marcela and Carl, you don't mind, I will ask Jean-Eric again. I know he just ended up talking, but just to know a bit on how you have reflected regarding this reality we have with COVID-19, and if that has reinforced your approach, your current approach of making compulsory certain things and not all voluntary, because as I was saying before, what has happened with women and men sending researchers sending original papers to scientific journals is quite representative of inequalities still going on. So again, I give you the floor.
No, thank you, Lina. And it's indeed very striking as an example, Marcel. I was not maybe I knew, but I hadn't. But I hadn't realized that this was so visible. And I think this really indeed shows that when you manage an early stage career, but not only early stage, the gender bias is absolutely there. It's invisible because in normal circumstances it's reasonably manageable. But then when crisis hit, the fragility of that balance becomes very apparent. We are now putting a little bit of resources. Lina, we just had a last call for the COVID-19 response, and there we have put some resources, and we had a few projects retained also on exploring the social consequences of COVID-19, including the gender dimension. So we will have out of these research projects some more data to see how impactful and deep this was, and see what policies for better resilience would need to be contemplated. So I hope this can help a little bit as well. I mean, there's of course one area which is very complicated, and we tried our best, which is how can we help research projects funded by us now, and not, so I'm speaking very specifically for Horizon 2020. How can we help them? How could we help them bridge the disruption of confinement of several months? I mean, this has been particularly visible for some schemes such as Marie Skłodowska-Curie, which is not, as you all know, I think, my direct responsibility. But here also we have tried to give space to extend the duration of the projects, to help really limit the impact on the research teams. And I don't think we were able to have gender-sensitive specific crisis measures. We didn't find them. We maybe should have contemplated them, but we did not. That's maybe a lesson which we will want to learn in a few months' time when we take stock, once we are behind and after the pandemic, to see how this disruption has really impacted on the project. But there were many facilitations, a lot of flexibility, which was introduced with the exception of increasing budgets, because that money was just not available anymore at the end of the program. That would have been, in many cases, well justified. I very much hope that the lack of additional budget, but only the flexibility in terms of time and reporting of activities, will in many cases have been enough. But I'm aware that there has been here also a gender angle which is not entirely tackled. Voila. Lina, thank you very much for accepting that I kind of leave now, and I apologize, Kurt, Marcella, and participants. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to say a few words. À bientôt, Lina.
Thank you. À bientôt. À demain. I
Oui,
think
absolument.
tomorrow we will.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Continue tomorrow.
We will change roles tomorrow. Okay, thank you very much, Anna. So we continue with this session, and I would like to ask Cart if for specific measures you have taken during the lockdown at your university, or good examples, around that could be applied to other places. Thank you.
Thank you. So I thought that I could share a few comments elaborating on a little bit of what Marcela just barely was able to touch on in her first set of comments, that first raised the issue of why we should suspect that the effects of the pandemic play themselves out differently for men and women. And maybe you, Lina, or was it Jean-Eric, briefly touched on the publishing issue. There was an article, I think yesterday, maybe the day before yesterday, in the Times Higher Ed, again, looking at this kind of thing. In this case, they looked at the production in the Med Archive preprint repository. And they noted that in January, before the shutdown, men were outnumbering women by a little over 20% in authorship on medical research papers, and that was up to 55% by April. There could be various explanations we might speculate on, but the point is that it's this kind of thing that makes us reasonably suspect that the effects of the pandemic play themselves out differently for men and for women. Even in Norway, which on the relative scale is a relatively gender balanced society, there are imbalances at home. So also in Norway, women report spending more time at home doing housework and tasks related to childcare. Well, for much of the spring, schools were closed, and that required a significant investment on the part of parents. And the surveys that are coming out, the research that is coming out about how that affected family structures, suggest that women took a much greater part of the responsibility than what men did. The school day for school children up until about the age of 11 is pretty short in Norway, and so that had a really big impact. Even when they started going back, it has a big impact on people at home. And what we see from the preliminary research on family dynamics during the pandemic is that it reinforces traditional patterns. And the pandemic is a genuine threat to reversing the work of many, many years and even decades regarding gender balance. I'm sure that people participating in the session here today have a deep understanding of the claim that gender balance or gender equality at work is closely related to gender equality at home. And that reflects in part cultural and cultures and attitudes of both men and women. What we see now in the pandemic is that it threatens things even more. So we have to ask some questions moving forward. Is academia different than other sectors? Is research the type of work that is specifically problematic in this kind of setting? Has the rapid conversion to digital teaching affected men and women differently in their roles as teachers in ways that subsequently affect their research activities? And maybe there are positive things also. Maybe the time we're saving on commuting makes it possible to have, to deal with that greater engagement with our children in ways that have a reduced impact on our work. I don't know. There might be, we might have learned during the last 6 months a greater degree of flexibility than we've previously seen in ways that can be, that can play itself out positively. Well, this spring I was trying to bring this issue into the public debate, and the way that I did that was by going out in the media in Norway and saying that because of the differences in the way this affects men and women, we should let women return to their offices before men when we are reopening offices, because they're having a disproportionate burden at home. So to help compensate for the career cost, we should let women come back first. And we did, in fact, implement that at the policy level at Oslo Met as one of the criteria that could be used when we had to make decisions about who to let back. Now, it turns out that there was no big flood of people wanting to come back to their office, so it hasn't been difficult to make those kinds of decisions. But the point was to try to highlight this issue and suggest that an action like that could help to compensate for things. What we are still experiencing is that most people are working at home, and we have very little on-campus education at this point. It's mostly delivered digitally. And so these kinds of traditional issues about the division of labor at home are very present. So we try to train our people in leadership positions about leadership from a distance, leadership over digital platforms, and the kinds of things to check in with their employees about, in the hope that at least brings to the surface these kinds of issues. We did a round of surveying in June where we asked about these things, and we'll do another round in December where we're trying to get as many of our staff as possible to report on their experiences. And we do some other things, like we've been furnishing home offices and so on, to try to give people the chance to have the equipment that they need to focus on being able to stay productive at work. So those are a few initial thoughts and experiences that I can report on from my position. But I think that the possibility of the pandemic having profoundly different long-term impacts on the careers of men and women is substantial, and what Marcella touched on earlier about evaluation being carried out in ways that is cognizant of this, I think is extremely important. So thanks for the chance to share those reflections.
Okay, thank you very much. A very interesting initiatives that is very good to share with all of us. I think you were asking yourself, is academia different from other places? I have asked that myself many times, and it's always that coming to my mind is this meritocracy issue, that probably it doesn't work as much as we believe. Also, women in academia, I mean, I've been in academia since up to last year. I'm still, in fact, although I'm here. This idea meritocracy is really working, and possibly is not really working as we believe. So most women, even we think is our personal problem and not a systematic and a structural problem. And maybe we should work also in different institutions in order to we realized it's not just us, it's also a structural problem and a cultural problem, and who has the authority, who has not. And so I think this idea of meritocracy should be, I mean, I don't know, Marcella is saying yes. Now you have the floor. What do you think about that, or whatever experiences you want to share with us regarding the COVID impact? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So I actually wanted to touch upon something slightly different, what has not been discussed so much yet, although in the chat it has. And it has to do with the content of research, because this is something that is really important, right? And sometimes when we look at how the research is designed, it's not, achieving progress for humankind, but rather progress for mankind. If we look at the COVID-19, and Kurt already mentioned some of this, a study just published by Sabine Prijonek-Ergald and colleagues showed that by June 2020, none of the clinical trials published reported sex desegregated data. And we know that the disease falls differently on men and women, that the immune responses differ. It is very likely that the vaccine will have different effects. And on top of that, there are huge socioeconomic factors that need to be taken into account. And yet the ongoing research does not do sex-gender analysis. And it's not just the health aspect. The gender impacts will be felt in economic, psychological, sociological, technological, legal, and many other fields. And really, we need to recognize the world is not about the default male. The publicly funded research must bring benefits to all, and we must use this coronavirus experience, which has highlighted the many structural problems in the research system, and use it as an opportunity to do things better. So let me put it this way. Sex and gender analysis must be required as a default from research teams. And I will repeat this. Sex and gender analysis at intersection with other important factors and lines of social inequality must become the default requirement for research and innovation. Because time and again, we have seen research and innovation studies designed on the assumption that somehow women are smaller men with boobs, which is wrong, right? And unfortunately, this is where we've seen the least progress made. The Commission has taken the gender dimension in research quite far in Horizon 2020, and I really hope that Horizon Europe will be bolder in its requirements, but at the member state level, we are seeing much less activity. To implement the European research area, member states adopted so-called ERA national action plans and strategies. And a recent analysis that we have done in the Standing Working Group shows that of the 220 gender equality actions overall, only 48 focus on gender dimension in research. So again, this is really not a time for gender equality to disappear from the policy framework for the European research area, because this area of action is really far from achieved. And let me make a couple more points. In addition to the gender dimension, the situation has provided a huge thrust to explore the possibilities, but also the limits of homeworking, as we have heard. It has provided a huge thrust to reconsider the need to travel to meetings and explore the online possibilities. And this can have gendered consequences because, as anyone with caring responsibilities and less grant money will attest, the ability to attend online conferences is actually a good opportunity to participate. And importantly for me, in the process of creating opportunities for people with limited mobility, we can also contribute to greening of research and innovation by maximally cutting down travel. And I can really tell you, some of those meetings really don't need to take place physically. The last issue I want to mention is mental health and well-being. The impact of COVID-19 is not clear-cut. It's giving us opportunities to reconsider agency, self-organization, and autonomy on the plus side, but also unequal workloads and burnout on the other. And again, I just want to stress, it will be very important to study these effects in gender-sensitive manner on the labor market overall, but for researchers specifically. And it's really great to see that the Commission has taken steps in this manner. Some member states as well, but I think that we really need to insist on the gender dimension, intersectional gender dimension being the default from which we operate for the future.
Thank you very much, Marcela. I cannot be more agree with you, with my different kind of feminist economist that I am. Also director of a master on gender equality, so I completely agree with what I've been doing all my life. So this is important. And it's important also that what you were saying, that is this COVID-19 has shown obviously the inequalities we know we had, but also is opening windows. I think they are important also to highlight the good possibilities this process is bringing to us. So we are running a bit not very well of time, I have to say, and still there is another poll that we ask people to go through, and now there was time also to open questions to our participants. I have to say that most of them, as far as I know, are let me do it later. Most of them are really very concrete towards the Commission, to Jean-Henri. But since he's not here, we will collect all that question and to pass on the Commission that probably, obviously, will answer this question that will not end up in nowhere. We will really make sure that they will arrive. So I have a couple of questions just for Marcela, for Cart, since they are here, and probably we will finish with that. We will encourage once more to answer the poll, because it's good to have information. Very important to have information in order to find the best answer. There are this couple of questions, and I will give the floor to you both to end up. We will have just 5 minutes, so that will really be the end. This one person asked if making all the European Union funded research content gender sensitive is a justified opt-out system. And another question is, does gender equality mean more female researchers in general, or more support for female researchers to excel in their endeavors? So there are many other questions, but they were sort of the first two that were not specifically directed to Jean-Henri, and because we don't have much time, we have picked it up for you to answer. You could answer one of them, both of them. Is up to you, it's your choice. So maybe Cart, that because Marcela took at the last position, so I give you the floor for 2 minutes. Another 2 minutes to Marcela. Just 1 minute to say goodbye. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. With respect to the second question about gender equality, does that mean more women, or does it mean more support for the women who are there? The answer is yes. So the work of gender equality is about creating good career opportunities for individuals. And one of the important discoveries that we make when we engage in the work of gender equality is that it's not just good for women, it's good for men too. And we learn how to be better leaders and department chairs and support, maybe initially by engaging with gender equality issues and working with women, but that develops skills in those of us in leadership positions that then benefit the men in our organizations too. So the work of gender equality is about, first of all, supporting women who are in the system and assuring that they have good career opportunities, whatever that's going to mean lots of different things for different individuals. But it also comes to affect, for example, hiring practices and so on, in ways where we can, have ambitions about meritocracy, but have maybe developed policies that help us avoid some of the worst deviations from that. So I think that's what I have to offer to those questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Marcela, please.
Okay, so I will take the other one. I mean, it makes all sense, and it is in line with what I have been already saying, and also the standing working group has included this in the positions on the future of ERA and others. So yes, maybe we could really try to reinforce the gender dimension now in Horizon Europe. Push research funders in Europe to cooperate on this, to develop methodologies. I mean, I know that the Research Council of Norway is doing great stuff for many years on this, and others are as well. So let's pull the experience that we have so far, and let's make it a requirement as of the next framework program. I mean, now we have taken sort of a giant leap with JEPS. I mean, I would not have believed that this would become a reality, because I was anticipating so much opposition from the Eastern countries, and somehow it is probably going to become a reality. So why not with the gender dimension? We can think big. We can continue explaining it to people. It will be part of the JEPs. And it's really, it's common sense when you explain to people what the gender dimension is about. We don't really face so much opposition, because people are then like, okay, so this concerns my mother's health, for example, right? I mean, it's good for everyone. It's not like it should be taught at schools, and we just need to think about how to integrate it in the European research, higher education area, both of them. There are now synergies being planned by the member states and commission, so we should push for the curricula in higher education institutions to take this on board. That's my 5 points, 5 cents.
Okay, so if we have 1 minute left. So just to thank you again, to thank the Commission for organizing this process. I hope we will be able to work also at the Parliament. We hope that also in real life, not only online, to work and to share these good experiences, these good practices, because there are many things very well done in different places, and probably we still need to put together all these experiences. I finished also this idea Carl was saying, this creating good career for individuals is good for women, but also good for men and good for institutions, because obviously when we are introducing all that, the organization culture is changing and is becoming not also more fair, but also probably really meritocratic. Before I was criticizing this meritocracy, but probably they will become more meritocratic, and it will be also very good for possibly with more transparency, more accountability, and I think this is good for science, good for researchers, and good for well-being of people. So we are really on time. Thank you very much. And we will keep all the questions and obviously to pass on to the people that were addressed. So thank you very much. Thank you, Marcela. Thank you, Kat. And thank you, everybody, for participating so actively. Thank you very much. And we will move forward.